Hello, this is Jay Ellenby, President of Safe Harbors Business Travel. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're now joining us in our fifth in a series for our Travel Expert Series. And I am really excited to have a good friend of mine, Zane Kerby, with us today. Zane is the President and CEO of ASTA, American Society of Travel Advisors. Welcome, Zane.
Hey, Jay, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And it's fantastic to have you with us. For everyone out there, ASTA represents the travel community, travel agency community, travel management community, and with over 10,000 members, and does an amazing job in supporting our industry, advocacy and training and so on. And their value is immense. And so we're very excited to have Zane with us today. So Zane, past couple months, and I think you're at home right now. What have you been up to the past couple months?
Well, it's been a really busy time at ASTA, and it's also been a time of rediscovery here at home for me. I have rediscovered my love of cycling, and so I've been out on the trail near our home, and I ventured out about 25 miles, which is good. Sometimes after work, I'll go there to kind of de-stress. But I've also rediscovered the refrigerator is far too close to my home office here, and so I need to be better about that. It's way too close and too accessible to me.
So hopefully the biking's giving you a chance to work that off, though.
A little.
Well, maybe you can move the refrigerator a little further away so you can really work up an appetite.
Either that or a lock or something that I have to work at to get it open. It's just far too easy, unfortunately.
Well, thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Oh.
So give us some good news. Give us some good news from ASTA. What's ASTA been doing?
Well, ASTA's been very busy. As I mentioned, it's been probably the busiest time that I can remember. The work that ASTA is performing on behalf of the travel advisor community is sort of unprecedented. And we're really helping lawmakers understand what impact the COVID virus has had on our industry and what help is needed moving forward. We met with Congressman Trey Hollingsworth last week and tried to help him understand these great congressmen from Ohio. In peacetime, most of us want the government to deliver the mail, defend the border, secure our rights, and get out of the way, right? Mm-hmm. But in times of crisis, no one wants the government to be a sort of a bystander to our problems. We want the government to help. And I think it's heartening that this bitterly divided and bipartisan, bitterly divided Congress has actually managed to produce 3 enormous bills in the space of about 24 days. And now they're also trying to figure out what to do next. And it doesn't look like more relief is going to happen before July, but it's really important now for the ASTA kind of stands between the nexus of business and government, and helping the government understand how they can support our businesses is a really important thing. The other thing that ASTA is doing is trying to help restore confidence in travel, and there's several initiatives in that regard that we're undertaking. I think we can talk more about. But I think the work that we're doing has never been more important.
Absolutely agree. Your team, you have a very talented team, and we're fortunate as an industry to have you and everybody that's associated with ASTA. So thank you.
For those who don't know, Jay actually testified before the U.S. House Committee on Small Business, the Small Business Administration, who oversees the Small Business Administration, about 2 months ago as the pandemic was just starting out. He did a wonderful job representing travel advisors of all shapes and sizes, and helped, again, the 17 congressmen and women on the committee understand the impact to our business. And your testimony was really awesome. Thank you for taking the time out to do that. That was a fun day.
You bet. It was a fun day. And, quite honestly, it was an honor. It was an honor to represent ASTA and the industry. And I think hopefully we made an impact.
Sure did.
So Zane, let's talk a little about the current environment. And as you're seeing with the travel community, how has it impacted the travel community?
Well, I mean, I think everyone's watching the news, and I don't know what more I can say about the impact of travel, other than to say that it's really injected a certain amount of fear and anxiety and uncertainty into a process that we thought that was sort of working really, really well for the most part. I mean, if you look at the data of sort of just TSA throughput, we're usually in the 2.2 million people per day going through TSA. Now it hit the low end. I think the low nadir was hopefully behind us on April 14th when 87,000 people went through TSA checkpoints. Last weekend, in the sort of the third week of May, we had about 318,000 people going through those TSA checkpoints, which, compared with 2 million is very low, but compared with the low nadir in the middle of April, you're starting to see some green shoots here, which I think is really good. It's an encouraging sign. At least we're now moving in the right direction. I think the thing about this is that kind of makes it challenging is that there are so many different entities that regulate the travel industry. I know your focus is business travel. Now the Department of Transportation and the FAA have broad authority over the airline industry, which represents a few players, right? I mean, there are only 4 or 5 large airline entities that sort of run the 80+% of airline capacity in the United States. But there are literally thousands of hotels, and so the FAA and the Department of Transportation can kind of shape the rules of the road for the airlines. But if you go to the hotels really aren't regulated by the DOT in any meaningful fashion. They're more regulated by the sort of local health departments for cities and states. And so because there's no sort of overall regulating authority for hotels, it makes it hard for anyone to sort of get to sort of propose regulations that will stick or be enforceable. And just to let you know kind of what kind of a crazy is maybe a too strong word, but an interesting problem this is. The FAA has authority. Well, sorry, the FAA has authority to put people through checkpoints, but they have been asked by Congress to figure out what the new regulations are. In order to should people be allowed to should the FAA or the TSA be allowed to check your temperature? If so, can they deny you boarding? If you have a temperature, is that an accurate measure of whether or not you have the virus? Are you taking the virus somewhere? So there aren't any, the FAA has so far refused to offer any sort of new guidance or regulations on that particular issue. So because of that, Congress is asking them to do it. They've so far stayed silent. And so it just creates this sort of vacuum of what are the new regulations? Are they going to keep me safe? And a lot of that is keeping, businesses and individual travelers on the sideline for now.
So you also, ASTA does a lot of work, certainly for the travel community, but also you do a lot of outreach to consumers. With what you just said, with the amount of confusion that is with respect to the airlines and hotel and so on, and the lack of regulation on this and consistency, what are you hearing from consumers?
Yeah, I think you're seeing that the most intrepid consumers are sort of getting back to business. They are out there, they're flying, and they're back out on the road. But for the vast majority of consumers, they're still kind of they're waiting on the sidelines to see what emerges from this. We've done a lot of testing and a lot of polling of consumers over the last little while, and some things some things will actually bring confidence, and some sort of pronouncements and some conditions don't bring any confidence at all. What consumers have told us is that they really want to hear from local, reliable government officials, and they want to hear from medical experts at the CDC. Once those two entities can provide clarity around what conditions and what new protocols will keep people safe as they travel, then I think you're going to see a lot more people in the skies and a lot more people filling hotels. But until those two things happen, until the two of them get together and sort of lay out the new rules of the road, and whether social distancing or wearing masks or whether testing becomes part of our future, until those things are determined and communicated effectively, you're not going to see, we're not going to see travel return to sort of pre-COVID levels. I think the only other thing I'd say about that is that there's several proposed bills in the House that ASTA has signed on to provide broad business indemnification for people, because the reality is that a business doesn't want to send someone on the road if they end up contracting the virus, getting sick, and or infecting their own family members. That kind of liability, if you're sending someone on the road for a few $1,000s, but the liability is $1 million in a lawsuit, those are really difficult decisions difficult circumstances that businesses find themselves in, and they want and need some level of protection from that kind of risk. So what we at ASTA, we believe that that businesses, particularly our members who are recommending people to travel, we want them protected in terms of making sure that people can't come back to them and say, well, you told me it was safe to go, and so I went and I caught the virus on a plane or in a sandwich shop or in a hotel, and so I'm coming after you and or any of those businesses. So we're working on several fronts. Again, there have been several bills proposed that ASTA has signed on to, and we look at the next round of COVID relief to include some business indemnification. We're again focused on our members.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because it's becoming incredibly challenging. We have travelers today. We do have some travelers who are out on the road right now, and the differences between each airline has different policies. The hotels, as we've talked about, and then there are car companies, and then there are those who, the shared economy, the Airbnb, the Ubers, and so on. What are all the different policies that are involved? And then through that, in addition to that, is there's still some states where you have to quarantine. You have to have a 14-day quarantine. So as a travel advisor who takes great pride in providing recommendations at the highest level, and taking great pride in making sure that their travelers get from point to point to end in a reasonable manner, it's become incredibly challenging.
I think you're right. It has become challenging, but it also highlights the need for that and the work that a travel advisor does. I mean, to your point, the world has just gotten a lot more complicated, and our customers have to show up in person, right? I mean, that's part of travel. And when you are in this system of travel, you want to make sure that you're acting with the best information, the most relevant information. And so while the travel advisor's job has certainly gotten more complex, it's also thrust us right into the center of what I think is many, many more travel decisions as bounty returns. I will say, there's a lot of, if you think about the patchwork of state, to your point, cities, states, just within the United States, and then you multiply that by an incredible factor of traveling internationally, the world has got more complicated, and the role of a travel advisor has just become much, much more important.
I would agree with you. I would absolutely agree with you. I have incredible amount of pride and respect for those who are working with travelers day in and day out and guiding through the process, because if you ever need somebody to guide you through the process, today is absolutely the day. And thanks to ASTA, for the support and making sure that we cover all those bases. So we kind of talked about a number of things there. What really, it appears that moving forward, so let's say we're now into phase 2, we're starting to go into phase 3. You kind of already touched on it. It appears that there needs to be some kind of guidance. There needs to be some kind of guidance for the FAA, DOT, all the different agencies to provide to the airlines. Because you have some airlines who say they're going to block off the center seat. You have some airlines who don't promise that. And then the hoteliers, they're coming up with their own regulations and cars. But but it appears that certainly there needs to be a central guidance. And it sounds like that central guidance really starts with CDC.
Yeah, I think it does start. You bring up a great point. Like airlines have said, some of them have said, I think all of them at this point have said that wearing masks is a mandatory, right? But they're not allowed to enforce that regulation until the FAA creates a new regulation. And so far, they've declined to do so. So, and we already talked about the airports can conduct temperature screens, but it's not clear that they can even prevent people from flying. So Peter DeFazio of Oregon, he's the chair of the House Committee on Transportation, and other House Committee chairmen have also asked the DOT and Homeland Security to come up with new protocols for security, boarding, and other routines to sort of minimize the risk there. But we have a democracy, and this type of thing moves really slowly, unfortunately. We're certainly in support of new measures, and there's also a task force that's been asked to be put together so that public health officials, I think, really for the first time, are going to be sort of front and center in terms of determining who and what can travel, and making sure that we can stay safe in the skies. Now, for all intents and purposes, the CDC is the new Department of Transportation for the cruise industry. I know you're more focused on business travel, but when you think about it, the CDC has shut down the cruise industry until the end of July.
Yeah.
Well, and we have, obviously we're not telling people that they need to return to cruising right away, but the fact is that and maybe some of the frustration that I'm feeling and others are feeling are that these decisions are kind of being made in a box, and we don't really know when new guidance is coming out. We need more transparency in this process, and we're going to be calling on more of that as the organization that's representing travel advisors. Our businesses are travel reliant, and until these new protocols are determined by those who make the rules of the road, both on the regulatory side and our lawmakers, people, the vast majority of people are gonna wait.
So Zane, you and I, we've been through a number of issues in the past. We've been through 9/11. We've seen economic downturns. We've seen SARS. Why do you think the response it appears that it's taking longer than previously? I remember 9/11, they had policies, yeah, granted, the TSA was brand new, and it took a little bit for them to figure it out. We all remember those long lines at the airports and trying to travel. But it just appears, maybe we're all getting impatient today because we're all locked up in our homes. But why does it seems like it's taking longer than in the past? Is that a fair statement?
I think it's a really fair statement. It's kind of like a slow motion occurrence, so because the pandemic continues, right? I mean, the thing that I would sort of most liken it to or relate it to is the 2008 and 9 Great Recession. Now that sort of happened over a number of months, and enormous job loss and the economic activity sort of ground to a halt here. The speed, I think, with which this came upon us, and the job loss and the shutting of borders and the cancellation of flights, that just that I think caught people by surprise. And so while I agree with you, we're a few months in now, we should have more answers than we have. I think I am encouraged that the government has taken some pretty strong measures to make sure money is in people's pockets, and now I hope that they'll turn some attention to the needed travel industry to make sure that the new rules of the road are clear and distinct and effectively communicated.
So prediction time. You ready?
Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball, but I can tell you what I think.
All right. So do you think the cruise lines, you're saying to at least July 31st? Do you think that'll go beyond that, or you think July 31st is still pretty strong?
Wow, I sure hope that we're going to be putting out some pretty strong messaging from ASTA. I don't know if pleading is the right word, but it's going to be close to that with the CDC to sort of get their house in order, get their act together, and to tell us what it's going to take. From everything we can read from the tea leaves, they've said, well, it's incumbent upon the cruise industries to bring plans to us, and then we'll decide whether or not to accept or reject them. it feels like they should have, and hopefully this is happening behind the scenes, that they're a little more transparent in terms of what they want the cruise lines to do in order to meet a new standard that will help keep people safe as they cruise.
Mhm.
So I really, really hope that that the CDC and the cruise lines are working feverishly behind the scenes to make sure that July 31st is the last day that cruise lines are not allowed to set sail.
Yeah. Air travel, clearly international is going to it's going to lag behind. But domestic travel, rebound, slow rebound. It'll be a slow build, I'm assuming. No, you agree with that?
Yeah, what was really interesting is when we went to consumers a few weeks ago, we asked them, hey, what are you thinking? How are you feeling right now? And again, the data is, it's only a few weeks old. It seems like forever ago, but they said two things to us. One of them was pretty obvious, and the other one caught us by surprise. And they said that the drive market was going to come back more quickly. That they thought that when we take a vacation or when we're planning trips, that we're going to make sure that we can have at least the option of driving to them, even if we fly there first, that we won't get stuck somewhere. We'll be able to drive back. But then the other thing that surprised us is that almost a similar number of people who said that they were going to drive for their next trip said that their next trip was going to be more than 6 hours on a plane. So that they were really excited about going somewhere very far flung from where they sit right now. And so while I agree with you, international travel is going to be tough for a while because each of those things need to be negotiated bilaterally, right? There is no sort of global governmental superstructure that dictates airline protocols. They have to be negotiated, bilaterally per country. And so because of that, those things are going to open up more slowly. I think if I were a local government official in Italy or Croatia, I would want to make sure that people who are coming to my city, we're not going to bring the virus with them. Yeah. And so those assurances need to be given because when either herd immunity has been achieved or testing is up and running in such a way that people can prove that they don't have the virus or they have the virus antibodies when they decide to travel internationally. So, but I think the desire to travel internationally is what surprised us. Even in the midst of the worst pandemic we ever had, people were saying, "Wow, I really want to get out of here, and I really want to go. I want to go to one of those aspirational places that I've been dreaming of going to forever."
It's been 3 months since I've been in a plane, and I am, you and I, we travel a lot, and I'm starting to lose my mind. I haven't been able to get into a plane, and it's odd, it's strange, and many people ask me. Of course, I am biased. People ask me, "Would you get into a plane right now?" And I'd say, absolutely. It's probably the safest time to travel. I'm not endorsing that. That's just my own opinion, but I think it's the safest time. It's as cleanest as an airplane may be, and but I'm ready to get back on a plane.
Yeah, I am too. I know. I think you saw it as well. Delta Airlines is taking, incredible new measures to make sure that the planes that we fly on, and I know Marriott and Hilton as well are taking new cleaning precautions to show that the hotel room that you stay in is cleaner than your own house, right? Yeah. So I agree with you. I'm trying to get to San Francisco as quickly as I can to vet for a potential event that we are, but unfortunately the planes are flying, but the hotels are closed right now. And so to your point, I think that, we are in the travel industry, we ought to lead by example, and I'm glad you feel that way. I know I feel the same way.
Yeah. Policies. The assumption is, yes, masks on airplanes is probably going to be part of a policy. What are the government policies, or if you want to call it government policies, but any other predictions that you think that might come down the road that travelers may be concerned with?
All I can tell you is that there's just going to be a big fight ahead. And I'll just give you a quick example of that. So, there are several, I think it's been pretty widely reported in the press that several airports are actually using technology to sort of mass screen people for temperatures for having a higher than the 98-degree temperature. So they have these cameras and they can tell who has a temperature. the airport council today just came out against that practice, saying, you know, what if someone's running or they have a fever for another reason, you're going to deny them boarding. That's put them at odds with the airlines, who are saying, you know, we need some sort of testing mechanism. Maybe it's not temperature taking, but we need some sort of testing mechanism in place to make sure that the people who get on the plane don't have the virus or have the antibodies. So there's a lot of things that are being proposed right now in order to make travel, to reduce the risks of spreading the virus, but nothing has been decided upon. And even people who you think would have shared interests, like airlines and airports, are actually at odds on maybe some of the things that are being floated right now. So I think we just have to kind of stay tuned. We do have to, I think, press on the CDC and the TSA and the Department of Homeland Security right now, Health and Human Services. We have to push on these guys to get their heads together as quickly as possible to determine the new rules of the road, and again, to communicate those as quickly as possible.
So oftentimes when you have situations, and by the way, I absolutely agree with you, what you mentioned there, but in these kind of situations, whether it be from any kind of downturn, economic downturn, or something that happened in globally, they're often game changers. There are disruptors that come into any industry, particularly the travel industry. Are you seeing anything creep in now? Are people gravitating to any new technologies that either could help support this, or it's still too early at this point?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question. What I think if I were a young, brilliant engineer at MIT or somewhere, or maybe I worked at Abbott Labs, you know, if you could get a test that was 99% accurate and that would give a result within 5 minutes, you know, I bet the nation's airports and airlines, who again have tremendous resources, would be very interested in talking to you. So I would, and not just here in the United States, but all over the world. So I think that there's certainly the will, and there's a financial backing to solve the biggest problem right now, which is how do we make sure that the people sitting next to us on a plane are not going to give us a deadly virus, or how do we make sure that we're not spreading it ourselves, because you know, some people who are asymptomatic are able to spread the virus. So if that to me seems like the biggest challenge right now that is facing the travel industry, and if someone can get these tests to be, again, 99.9% accurate, and can tell a government official that you know, someone either has the antibodies and can't spread the virus, or they don't have the virus, or they do have the virus and they have to be sent home and quarantine. That is, again, if I were smarter and had my academic career ahead of me, that's where I'd put my money and time.
I'm with you on that. Let's go find some of those whiz kids and put this together, Zane. So my takeaways, one is clearly the value of the travel advisor, working with the consumers, the corporations, the business travelers, and providing that information that is far and wide, that information, and the resources available. So that's my first takeaway, is the value of the travel advisor. The second one is consistency. Some kind of guidelines coming down from, let's say, CDC, FAA, many different agencies to help support some kind of consistency throughout the industry, which will then translate to consistency and confidence for travelers. And the last one is we need to find a whiz kid from MIT to put this program together.
Get us good, fast, accurate testing. Absolutely.
Zane, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Jay, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and again, thank you as well for allowing me the opportunity to testify and hopefully helped out the industry. So thank you. So everybody, thank you very much for joining us. Next week, Beverly Hunt, who is our operations director at Safe Harbors, we'll be talking about policy changes and updates, how we're trying to keep you updated on the many, many changes that are taking place literally on a daily basis. So she'll be with us next week. Zane, again, thank you very much. And thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jay.